Good morning. I've had tough acts to follow, so always a pleasure. I first heard Tiffany speak in North Carolina at the Training Industry Awards, and she was phenomenal, and she certainly did not disappoint this time. So thank you very much, Tiffany, and thank you for the wonderful introduction, Amanda. So when I was first asked if I would consider speaking at this event, I asked the theme, and immediately my mind went to a topic that has been percolating in my mind for about 2 years. And it's been one that I'm not normally shy about sharing my opinions, but it's one that I've been hesitant about. And this is because I often work with customers and clients of mine who they mainly want to upskill their employees because they're looking at profitability. They're looking at their bottom line. That's why they've brought me in. And that's all good. However, we're also entering into a phase, and this has been percolating in the back of my mind, and something that I'm calling the ethics of upskilling. And what do I mean by the ethics of upskilling? Well, our workforce is changing. It always is. But one of the main things that's happening right now is the rise of the contingent worker. I am a contingent worker. I take contracts, I have multiple clients, I manage my own time, I would probably desperately need an EA because I don't know where I'm supposed to be half the time. But anyway, I'm not alone. There's 77 million of us around the world. And in the United States, 40% are in an alternate work arrangement. And this is increasing 36% over the past 5 years. I'm spouting out these metrics, but if you go to the smart people at Deloitte Bersin, this is a study they did on the contingent workforce in 2018. So why does this matter, and what does this have to do with upskilling? Well, we talk about the benefits of the contingent worker, and there certainly are. I was pleased to see that Ernst & Young said we are highly skilled and specialized. Thank you very much. We're looking for flexibility, and it's also to the myth that it's not just the young person, the millennial who's just graduated, who is going into this environment. In fact, it's a lot of older people. I'm not going to be happy about that descriptor, but people who are looking are different stages of their life, who maybe are looking to transition out of the workforce but still want to be involved, to a certain extent. And most importantly, these are people with skills that they want to deepen, but they don't present a linear career path. So they need to move and migrate from organization to organization to deepen. Now, those are the positives, and there's a lot. But then we also have to look at the reality of a lot of the contingent workers are what we're going to see on the other side. They're earning at or below minimum wage, which is quite scary. They're balancing multiple gigs. I don't like the term lazy millennial because I think that's absolutely awful. No, these are people who have not had the benefit of time and experience, and they're trying desperately to get that. They're taking 2 or 3 gigs just to get and broaden their portfolio. And imagine what it's like for them in their environments. It's extremely challenging. They don't have access to benefits, they're not protected, and often too, they're more vulnerable to workplace injuries. And I will be making these slides available, so at the bottom I've cited where I've gotten these stats from, so you can certainly have a look at those. So that's the bleak side of things that we need to be thinking about, and my heart does go out to a lot of these people. Because as you're an employer, it almost feels, I've actually heard some employers use, well, they're disposable. It's almost like going to a pet store. I'm going to pick out a puppy, I'm going to pick out a gerbil, I'll pick out a fish, I'm going to make my team. And I get where that comes from, and it's not a bad thing when it comes to profitability, but we also need to have the balance. And I apologize, the next slide actually doesn't look great, but what interested me is Upwork is a platform that a lot of contingent workers go to. They have 12 million on their roster, and employers put up contracts and people bid on them. But what interested me about this, and I apologize if you can't see it, and I'm just going to put my laser pointer here, is they actually list here the differences between an independent contractor and an employee. And right number 4 is does not need or receive skills training. Which to me I found a little bit like, wow, so where is that social contract? And let's look at another platform. And these are good platforms. I'm not slamming these platforms. I'm merely pointing out what we see on them. Another one is Fiverr.com. And as it implies, people take a bid for contracts, and the Fiverr is €5 an hour or $5 an hour. And Fiverr helps you by giving you a whole range of training as to how you can build up your brand to be able to be more prolific and to get more contracts. And both of these things made me think of the following, which is upskilling now the tax of the contingent worker? just to remain employed and viable and not having an employer behind you, are you now responsible for doing this yourself? Now, on the one side, I think it's great that we have so much information, LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, all of these things, and that people are proactive about bettering themselves. I think that's great. But consider if you're on the contingency worker side and maybe you're not as protected, does it now mean that you are assuming the risk because you have to decide yourself, well, where am I going to invest my time? I have a mortgage to pay, I have kids to pick up, I have all these things that I need to do, and now I also have to manage my own career without maybe having a mentor or a platform that's guiding me. I now even have to pick from multiple platforms to see where I go, and I'm assuming that risk. And that's where I think we have some responsibility. Why do I think that? Well, I'm just going to show some facts that we see here. We do see a difference that's happening in the wage and wealth gap. In 1%, we'll be controlling 2/3 of the wealth. What's frightening about that is, well, first of all, I flew economy. I don't know about everybody else, but we're probably all in the 99%. And I really think that if we all at drinks tonight put ourselves together, we could maybe take on that 1%. But if we know that education, and I'm just throw up while I'm speaking a few more metrics about this for you to read, we know that education is one way that people can move themselves up the ladder. But we also know too, I mean, as Tiffany pointed out, most skills only last 5 years. That's going to probably be faster. We know that the gap between skills is going to get, more and more massive. So picture a ladder where, the rungs are getting further and further and further apart for people. And this is where I think we have to think about our responsibility, because if we don't invest a little bit, at least in those contingent workers, we're also at risk ourselves of creating what I'm calling a skills desert. Because the war on talent is not going to go away just with contingent workers and full-time employees. We still need to be able to attract. And I hear this comment where people say, well, I'm not going to invest in a contingent worker because they're just doing a contract for me and they're going to go away. But I think we have to rethink that. We have to rethink that, yes, we get the flexibility, but loyalty comes in different forms. It may be how our brand is perceived. It may be also to our reputation, and it may be also to that person maybe coming back to us or recommending friends. So it's not so transactional, okay? So we do have that responsibility. But on the flip side, and Tiffany gave some great ways that we can empower our own employees, I'm probably going to be a little bit bleaker and say, what are the ways that we also tax our current employees? And one of them, I'll probably have to run out of the room really quickly after I say it, because I might get, tackled. But I'll say it anyways. And so one of the first ways is, when people join an organization, what's the first thing they have to do in terms of training? Onboarding, compliance, right? And all of those different things, particularly if you're in a regulated industry. And I come from finance, and one of the things that I see, this is just a laundry list. If you work for a bank, doesn't matter if you work in IT, housekeeping, back office, or even in a branch, these are all the things that you need to spend. And each one of these, the regulatory bodies, and I've worked in multiple countries, they will say each one of these is an hour. So even if you are never even in a branch, you need to know what to do in a robbery. Now, some of these are very important, diversity, inclusion, happy to see there, health and safety. Yes, if and when, I'm going to say probably when I have a heart attack, I do hope that some poor soul is able to save me. Handling confidential information, ethics, all of these things are important. But the tax that we put on to make these employees have to do this, when we consider all the other things that they could be upskilling themselves on, is also something maybe we need to go back to the regulatory bodies to say, can we rationalize this? Not eliminate it, but can we optimize it? Can we get these down to 10 minutes? For people who aren't in a branch, do they need to know anti-money laundering? Or as I call it, let's teach you how to launder money, if you ever do one of those courses. It's true, I've learned more about that. And then if you look at some other, and I apologize, this is a US example, but it was one that came to mind because I used to be previously at KPMG. And if you were an accountant, and I just picked a generic occupation, you have to do 80 hours of training each year. And you can look at the metrics, and someone wants to check my math. It's a lot of money that ends up happening, and it's a lot of time if you look at all of the accountants that you have. Now, this is not in and of itself a bad thing to say that they have to do 80 hours, but if we really started looking at how these 80 hours are designed and configured, it's quite scary. They don't count microlearning. They don't count mentoring. They don't count all these things that we consider as learning. They really only count sitting in a seat. And I used to go to those conferences, and they would come for 5 days, and everyone would just have their iPhones out, their iPads doing work, and then they would say, and here's your code to enter to track your thing, and everyone would be like, oh my God, write it down. Did you get it? Did you get it? Okay, boom, and they're out the door, right? So that's not really upskilling. And when does that person have to upskill? If they are already being taxed these 80 hours. So this is things we need to look at. The other one, and this is the one where I go, oh, is how are we, and I'll tell this through a story, actually. So I was on a train, and I was listening to a woman who was talking about how she's being trained at work, and she said, oh, I just got another notification on my phone. I have to answer these 10 questions. Somebody challenged me. I was like, and I listened to her, and she said, and I started talking to her, and she said, yeah, they've installed this gamification app, and now when someone challenges me, I have to answer the questions, and I have to keep my name on top of the leaderboard. And I said, wow, well, I didn't tell her I was in training because I thought she might throw me under the train. But I want to be a clear distinction here. Gamification is an excellent way to engage, and game-based mechanics are something I really get jonesed about. But I also think, too, with some of these new technologies, some of these things that we're putting in, I think we also need to be really mindful about why we're doing it, what type of results are we expecting to get from it, and in this place where the pressure on some employees, I think this is, we present learning as warm and fuzzy. For some people, this is an immense pressure and challenge just to stay employed. And so maybe we need to think about what we're doing when we're actually doing some of these things. And what competition and levels are we putting in? It's a good thing to have social pressure, absolutely, but when does that social pressure become too much? And are we just burning out? So it's not all doom and gloom. Well, it is for Ontario right now, because General Motors, this is a true one, did close a factory, and 14,000 jobs flooded the market. But what I was really happy about is I think we are doing the right thing in this case, as much as we can. We can debate the closure, but Durham College, we got higher education, is actually collaborating with businesses in that region to talk about what skills they have gaps for, what roles they need to hire for, and they're actually benchmarking where those manufacturing jobs are, and can they help close the gap and do it as quickly as possible. And General Motors is investing a significant amount of money in this. It's not perfect, but I do think there's actually, in this, I was pleased to see that there was a responsibility, and I think this is the direction we need to go. And so just in closing, when we're thinking of learning, we're thinking of developing learning cultures, and we're thinking of how we need to upskill, we can't be so transactional about it. But we do need to be brutally efficient. Think about that person on the other end and all the other things that they have to do. What fears do they have? How do they need to stay relevant? Because it is a dog-eat-dog world out there for some industries. Maybe we need to challenge the regulatory bodies about what we exactly need to train people on and how much time we are investing in building that. Because some of it is just maybe not needed. Build loyalty through investment. Yes, I know in some regions you can't treat contingent workers like employees because then they become employees, but you can certainly mentor them, and you can certainly talk to them and connect them into your network and build that loyalty so that they actually have somewhere to go to help them decide where it is they want to take their career. And you will get rewarded for it, and you are contributing back to the greater skills garden that is out there. And lastly, work with higher education. They're the ones who are also there to help you, and they're there they understand the people who are coming through their schools and what they are looking to do, and use them to guide them. So thank you very much, and pleasure being here.